This man, Roberto Martinez, has pulled off one of the most remarkable career trajectories in modern history, in anything. Literally any profession. When I saw the headlines, I felt like everybody else. How the heck did this guy get this job? But the more you look into it, the worse it gets. Because if you recognize this guy, Roberto Martinez is now the new head coach of the Portuguese national team, one of the most talented national teams in the world that has a particularly ripe golden generation that seems to be coming through that might be able to grab them a second major trophy. The only issue was that they had a huge issue with this guy, Fernando Santos. Even though he won them their 2016 European Championship, their first major trophy ever, his tactics were bland, boring, and uninspiring. So they went out and got somebody whose tactics at Belgium were bland, boring, and uninspiring. Because if you recognize the Roberto Martinez face, because that's that guy's name, Roberto Martinez, he's been the coach at Belgium for the last 6 years. And he helped engineer Belgium's downfall and utter disgrace at the past World Cup, where they lost their first World Cup group stage match in over 20 years. And the golden generation of Belgium with Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku, and Eden Hazard crashed and burned one final fabulous time by getting dominated by Canada, losing to Morocco, and drawing with Croatia, which honestly, that's the only match they should have gotten points out of. And to Martinez's credit, he can't score goals for Romelu Lukaku, but the other two matches were a travesty. Well, I wanted to give Roberto Martinez the benefit of the doubt, so I did a lot of digging to see if at one point he had been wildly successful or a really great manager to warrant his selection as the Portuguese national team coach that seemed to get everybody up in arms. But the more that I looked, the worse it got. Let's start with his playing career, which was perfectly respectable. He came up at Zaragoza in Spain, and he made one appearance for them in La Liga, and then bounced into England and made over 300 combined appearances for Wigan Athletic and Swansea City over the course of his career, before he was eventually released by Swansea City, played one more year at Chester City, wherever they happen to be. And that's largely irrelevant, other than the fact that that is somehow how Roberto Martinez's managerial career started. The future Portuguese national team manager, in fact, we can start a counter here, he's currently 16 years away from being the head coach of the Portuguese national team, and only, remarkably, a decade away from being the head coach of the Belgian national team. Roberto Martinez was hired by Swansea City. He was hired to replace the guy that had released him a year earlier. On February 24th, 2007, he returned to Swansea City as a manager on a 2-year contract, replacing Kenny Jackett, who had let him go at the end of the previous season. Cool. The appointment was mostly met positively from the fans, despite him not having any managerial experience. What? This guy's been doing it his whole life. This is what he does. He's so good at this. He must be the greatest interviewer of all time. His career in managing starts out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, this is a team that made the playoff to try and get promoted to the second tier of the English league system for the first time in over 20 years. And they bring in Roberto Martinez, who has never coached anything. No coaching experience whatsoever, not even on a staff. He takes over the season in February and manages to engineer a 7th place finish, which is actually one behind what they did the previous season. The year after that, he does manage to finally get them up into the championship. And that right there ranks in the top 3 of his overall managerial achievements. This led to his chaotic next season, where he actually managed to finish 8th in the championship and said that he would not leave Swansea unless he was forced out.
I'm not leaving.
So when Wigan came calling, he naturally answered the call and left for Wigan. Swansea fans have never forgiven him for this, and when he came and played against Swansea on October 26, 2010 as the Wigan manager, he got a really hostile reception. But he's obviously a career climber. And this might feel like it was a long time ago, but this is a Wigan side that was a Premier League mainstay at this point. They had been up for, can I count? They've been in the Premier League for 4 seasons at this point when he takes over. And they're actually coming off their second best finish. They finished 11th when Dave Whelan hires Roberto Martinez at Wigan. And you can clearly see the impact that Roberto Martinez has on the team, and engineering a finish of 16th in his first year. 16th! Then he finished 16th again, then 15th, and then in his final season, something very weird happens. Roberto Martinez gets relegated with Wigan. But at the same time, he wins the FA Cup, which is one of those weird, fun, famous sort of things that's happened in world ball, but also he got relegated while winning the FA Cup with Wigan. And he's such a charismatic, energetic, great interviewer or something, he's not fired at this point. After a relegation, after 4 seasons below what Wigan not only achieved the season before he got there, but 2 seasons before he got there. They had finished higher in the league both times. He's allowed to then leave on his own accord, and they pay a $2 million compensation to bring him to Everton. and he goes back into the Prem. So he might just be I don't know. Is winning the FA Cup as a relegated side lucky? Is it a managerial masterstroke while you're getting relegated? Sure, you get to decide, but that's another one of his top 3 moments, in my opinion. But getting relegated and then hired back into the Premier League by a much bigger club in Everton, especially at the time, that qualifies as failing up. Now, this is where Roberto Martinez has his best ever season as a manager. He finishes 5th in the league, in the Premier League, with an Everton side that, not to his credit, had finished 7th, 7th, and 6th the 3 years prior. But Roberto Martinez takes a little time to work his magic, and the next 2 seasons they finished with an identical points record of 47 and an 11th place finish in the league, which is hilariously unique in their Premier League history. They had finished above 11th every single season from 2006 to 2014, which of course is the one year he engineered at 5th, and then he finished 11th twice. And then after he left, they got better again. They finished 7th, 8th, and 8th. Every one of those seasons, after he left, they had more points. Every single one. Like, it's incredible. This is the second consecutive job, Wigan notwithstanding, because they actually had been relegated into the previous league, that the team produced better results for consecutive seasons after he was gone, which is not exactly an inspiring managerial record, and prompted his sacking in May of 2016 when the club was actually in 12th. No matter, because on August 3rd, 2016, Roberto Martinez was appointed the manager of Belgium and entrusted with managing one of the most proud golden generations in the world. I mean, how do you end up as the manager of a top 10 national team in the world, inarguably, after you get sacked by a mid-table Premier League team, after you get released on compensation immediately by a relegated Premier League team, after you leave in fanfare and anger from a mid-table championship team, which you join having no coaching experience whatsoever? I don't know. But 4th time was the charm, because Roberto Martinez, full credit, caught fire as the Belgian manager in 2016. He joined after the Euros and was immediately qualified for the World Cup in 2018. And at the 2018 World Cup, Belgium was handed a fairly easy group, managed to beat Tunisia and Panama, and did actually beat England, who are, of course, future semi-finalists, but of course, so were Belgium. Handed a relatively easy draw in the round of 16 against Japan. Don't tell Germany that! Oh boy. Belgium went down 2 goals and scored a famous 90+4-minute winner on the counterattack to get into the quarterfinals, where he pulled off the best win he's ever pulled off as a manager, Roberto Martinez, beating Brazil 2-1 in the quarterfinal. Belgium went on to lose to France, who of course went on to win the entire World Cup. A very respectable performance that honestly is very surprising, knowing the background of Roberto Martinez to this point. This was the high water mark. He managed to get Belgium into the Euros with another comfortable qualification. He was always comfortable in qualifying, where they finished atop a group with Denmark, Finland, and Russia, which of course was a very distracted group with Christian Eriksen's life or death situation, which thankfully he managed to survive, and then suddenly become incredibly world-class again. But that's not the point. Belgium went into the round of 16, beat Portugal, and lost to Italy, a quarterfinal progression and a loss to an Italian team that did go on to win the Euros, which means for 2 consecutive tournaments, Belgium lost to the winner. And at this point, even at this point, after the World Cup and after this point, if he was hired by Portugal, it would make a lot more sense. Now it doesn't, and this is why. Belgium acquired essentially 3 scalps in his time. They managed to pick up no major wins in the Nations League that would reach this height. They beat England and Brazil at the 2018 World Cup, and they beat Portugal at the Euros. There would be no such scalps in the qualifying or main process of the 2022 World Cup, where Roberto Martinez oversaw a catastrophic meltdown that I talked about at the beginning. They got dominated by Canada for the world to see and scored one of the most undeserved goals I have ever seen. Something that still honestly sticks in my craw, and I don't like Canada. They pretend to be nicer than us, but they're just as mean. They are. Love the syrup, though. Morocco then ran Belgium off the field, and then Belgium, to its credit, I thought outplayed Croatia, but Romelu Lukaku'd it up all over the place, and they ended up with a draw. But Belgium, honest to goodness, should have had 3 points and been out of this anyways. It was a disaster. Tons of infighting, no locker room cohesion, uninspired tactics that were easily outpressed and outperformed by Canada. The same sort of issues in getting the best out of star players that has plagued the Portuguese national team that has now brought him in. Kevin De Bruyne had a terrible tournament, and Romelu Lukaku did too. They scored 1 goal, for crying out loud. Doesn't Portugal want offense now? Portugal under Fernando Santos on the other side did much better. They got all the way to the quarterfinal and put a 6th spot on a very good Swiss team before running into a Morocco side that stunned everybody. Now, it is a real shame that Roberto Martinez didn't take a new job after his 2018 2014 World Cup appearance with Belgium, because that would have been the only time he had succeeded upwards. But as Football 365 puts it, he has fallen onto his feet once again, landing the Portugal job. But perhaps we finally found the secret sauce, how Portugal has settled upon Roberto Martinez, relegated Wigan manager, failed Everton manager, destroyer of the Belgian golden generation's fragile cohesion. Fernando Gomes, the president of the Portuguese Football Federation, said at the news conference next to Roberto Martinez, "I appreciate the enthusiasm and ambition with which he received the invitation. If I was invited to manage the Portuguese national team, I would also receive that invitation with enthusiasm and ambition."